Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Saturday. Welcome. We're glad you're here. You know, I've been thinking about this horrific problem that we're having with people pouring over the border, drugs pouring over the border, women being sold into sex slavery, children missing, over 300,000 unaccompanied minors, the Mexican cartels making billions of dollars off of fentanyl, off the death of American citizens. We really have three problems. One, we have an administration and a Democrat Party that has destroyed, willingly so, knowingly so, sabotaged our immigration system. We don't need a new immigration system. We don't need bipartisan legislation. We need to enforce the law. But also, so-called birthright citizenship. Where does this come from? And the third issue is chain migration that was adopted in 1965 as part of the Great Society. Really, no Western nation does that anymore, but we continue to do these things, all three of them, to the detriment of the United States of America. There was a time when Democrats understood that we needed to have an orderly immigration system, that people coming into the country need to be known, they need to show allegiance to our country and our culture, and disassociate themselves from their past countries and governments. Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr., many of you haven't heard of him, but he was a very close aide and confidant to John Kennedy, later somewhat Lyndon Johnson. He was a Harvard professor, and he wrote a very famous book called The Disuniting of America, when even elitist scholars of the left believed in having a serious immigration system. As a matter of fact, in 1965, when they voted on this act, which has so destroyed American immigration policy, this Hart-Celler Act, one of the people who was most critical was a man named Theodore White. Theodore White was a liberal, he was a Democrat, but he was an author. And he wrote about the presidential elections, every election cycle, and he said this was the most senseless, damaging, revolutionary act of all the acts, and not too many people are paying attention to it. What did they know back then? What did Harry Reid know in the 1990s when he came out against illegal immigration and then flipped? When Chuck Schumer came out against illegal immigration and then flipped? When the AFL-CIO and the Teamsters Union and even the Farm Workers Union all opposed illegal immigration. Now they all support it. Is there something wrong with us? No, I don't think so. I want to read something from Professor Samuel Huntington, the late, a Harvard professor, and I think he put it succinctly and well. The differences between a patriotic public and a denationalized elite parallel other differences in values and philosophy. Growing differences between the leaders of major institutions and the public on domestic and foreign policy issues affecting national identity form a major cultural fault line cutting across class, denominational, racial, regional, and ethnic distinctions. In a variety of ways, the American establishment, governmental and private, has become increasingly divorced from the American people. And that's what this election was about. It wasn't a class election. It was about the establishment versus we the people. Politically, America remains a democracy because key public officials are selected through free and fair elections. In many respects, however, it has become an unrepresentative democracy because on crucial issues, especially involving national identity, its leaders pass laws and implement policies contrary to the views of the American people. Concomitantly, the American people have become increasingly alienated from politics and government. This was written nearly 20 years ago. Donald Trump wins a landslide election. Among other things, he's talking about close the border, mass deportation. The people support it. Now, the media are pushing back. The Democrat Party's pushing back. Academia is pushing back. The same so-called elites, the same ruling class, the same establishment that put us in this position now with massively open borders, with people overwhelming our cities and our towns, with foreign gangs coming into the country, fentanyl coming into the country. God knows what's happening to women and children who get caught up in this process, the crime going through the roof, our educational systems overwhelmed with people coming into this system, our healthcare system overwhelmed. But who gives a damn, right? Because it's all for the Democrat Party, because they decided that rather than securing the border and ensuring lawful immigration, their future was with what? Birthright citizenship, they call it. All these illegal aliens, they'll have children, they'll be citizens, they'll be Democrats, and the Democrat will have a monopoly party for the next century. Thinking like Marxist communists. the party first, the country last, and the people last. But I want to talk about this just a little bit. What is birthright citizenship? We hear this. And I want to begin with Kristen Welker, who is the Meet the Depressed moderator. There have been great moderators there. She's not one of them. In fact, what she does here is maniacal, and much of what she does is maniacal, misleading, and in this case, a flat-out lie by omission. Watch what I'm talking about last Sunday in an interview with Donald Trump on this issue of so-called birthright citizenship. Go.
You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment?
That's not what the 14th Amendment says in Section 1. She's a liar, and she's not the only one. And I say that because I mean it. It says, in relevant part, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The fact that you're born in the United States isn't enough. There's been no law passed, none, that conveys birthright citizenship onto illegal aliens or their children. There's been no Supreme Court decision that definitively confers birthright citizenship onto illegal alien children. None. Nobody's 100% certain how this came to be, but everybody seems to be 100% certain that the president can't fix it. Well, does the Constitution confer birthright citizenship on children of illegal aliens? Of course it doesn't. What does jurisdiction mean? She purposely read it out of the Constitution. Does it mean geography? Jurisdiction has nothing to do with geography. It has nothing to do with geography. Zero. It had to do with political allegiance to the United States of America. Now, how do we know this? Because that's what the author said it meant. Think about this. Tourists, diplomats, students here on visas, let's say they give birth in the United States. Does that make their children American citizens? Does that mean they're not citizens of their home country? Of course not. We don't confer citizenship on the children of tourists and diplomats and students. Why then would we confer citizenship on the children of illegal aliens? Well, the Constitution doesn't. Jurisdiction means subject to the laws and rules of the United States. It does not mean the conference of citizenship by the fact of one's physical presence in the United States. This has absolutely nothing to do with the history of the 14th Amendment. It does not support that view. On the contrary, this part of the 14th Amendment, which is one of three post-Civil War amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th, dealing with the aftermath of the Civil War, not immigration. It was addressing the fact that recently freed slaves were to be treated as full citizens throughout the United States. It had to do with freed slaves, freed African black slaves. Nothing about immigration of any kind, legal or illegal. Some of the former Confederate states were resisting this through so-called black codes. And the amendment's language put an end to it. The drafters of the amendment weren't even thinking about immigration, let alone illegal immigration. At constitution.congress.gov, they write, the citizenship provision of the 14th Amendment may be seen as a repudiation of one of the more politically divisive cases of the 19th century. Under common law, free persons born into a state or nation were citizens thereof. But the horrendous Dred Scott decision that predated the Civil War, Chief Justice Roger Taney, writing for the court, ruled that the rule did not apply to freed slaves. The court held the United States citizenship was enjoyed by only two classes of people: white persons born in the United States as descendants of persons who were at the time of the adoption of the Constitution recognized as citizens in the several states, and who became also citizens of this new political body called the United States of America, and to those who, having been born outside the dominions of the United States, had migrated here too and been naturalized therein. Free slaves fell into neither of the categories, the court said, and this eventually led to the Civil War. The court further held that although a state could confer state citizenship upon whomever it chose, it could not make the recipient of such status a citizen of the United States. So even a free man descendant from a former slave residing as a free man in one of the states at the date of ratification of the Constitution was held to be ineligible for citizenship. So these are the factors that the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment specifically addressed. Not immigration generally, legal or illegal. And I'll prove it to you. On January 5, 1866, Lyman Tumble, an abolitionist, an ally of Abraham Lincoln, the senator from Illinois, introduced the first federal civil rights bill in the nation's history. Now, elements of the Civil Rights Act of 1860 eventually became the template for the 14th Amendment. So look how outrageously evil Welker was in not mentioning the language that is the relevant language, the most important language in this entire debate. She just blows it off. Section 1 of the 1866 Civil Rights Act, remember this was used as the template for the 14th Amendment, be it enacted that all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States, and such citizens, and it goes on to explain that they have equal rights. Not subject to any foreign power. You come here, you're an illegal alien from Mexico, you're still subject to your citizenship requirements, and Mexico still has power over you. So, in 1866, the Civil Rights Act, which was considered a tremendously humane act, and it was, and it had been vetoed by Andrew Johnson, the president at the time, and it was overridden, the first presidential veto in I don't know how long, by both houses of Congress, and they said, you know what, but we better enshrine this in the Constitution. So what did they do? In the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1866, in part because ratification was a condition for the states that had seceded to get back into the Union. Nothing to do with immigration. In fact, due to the jurisdiction requirement, most Native Americans were excluded from this amendment as they were considered to be citizens of separate countries, the reservations, it turned out later, that is, independent tribes. Now, I'm just explaining the historical context for this. Obviously, that's changed. But when you look at the original intent of the language, the reason that that's in the 14th Amendment, it has nothing to do with giving birthright citizenship to the children of foreigners who are here illegally. It didn't even enter their minds. Now, in 1898, in a decision that's cited by the birthright citizenship crowd, in the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, it can best be described as an activist decision, by the way. The Supreme Court conferred citizenship on an individual who was born in the United States as the child of lawful permanent residents, that is, legal immigrants. Even so, not the birth child of illegal aliens of the United States. Now, that decision was wrongly decided, but unless the Supreme Court reverses it, it is what it is. There have been other decisions, too, sort of chipping away at the edges of this, but the fact of the matter is there's no Supreme Court decision conferring citizenship on illegal aliens. There's no history around the 14th Amendment that does that either. None. So what are we to make of this? Well, it ought to be challenged. The media, in the form of Welker in this case, they lie. Everybody's lying about this except the people who actually support upholding the Constitution and enforcing the law. We have in front of me here an article was done in the New York Times conveniently after the election. And it says, under President Biden, more than 2 million immigrants per year have entered. Government data shows recent immigration surge has been largest in history. We've had major surges in this country of immigration. This is the biggest surge in way over a century, in 170 years, by Biden and the Democrat Party. When you look at birthright citizenship for legal aliens, when you look at chain migration, meaning a person who becomes an American citizen, having been an immigrant, apparently illegal even, they can bring relatives into this country, as I've pointed out over the years here, as I've pointed out a few months ago here with graphs. they can bring in up to 20, 30, 40 people. And I want you to think about that. If there's 20 million illegal aliens here and they bring in 5 people each, it's 100 million people. The Democrat Party's counting on this. They're banking on this. This is why they want no voter ID. This is why they want all kinds of barriers to what they are doing broken. That's why the border's open. They're more than willing to tolerate the sexual slavery of women. They're more than willing to tolerate the missing 325,000 unaccompanied children. They're more than willing to tolerate the rapes and the murders. They're more than willing to tolerate the Venezuelan gangs and the El Salvadoran gang, MS-13. They're more than willing to tolerate all of it because they are power hungry. And they view this as the surest way to make sure the Democrat Party cannot lose. And in the New York Times article, it says the immigration surge of the past few years has been the largest in U.S. history, surpassing the great immigration boom of the late 1800s and early 1900s. According to data the New York Times looked at, annual net migration, the number of people coming to the country minus the number leaving, averages 2.4 million people from 2021 to 2023, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Total net migration during the Biden administration is likely to exceed 8 million people. That is a faster pace of arrivals than during any other period on record, including the peak years of Ellis Island, when millions of Europeans came to the United States. Even after taking into account today's larger U.S. population, the recent surge is the most rapid since at least 1850. That's in 175 years. 175 years. Mass migration requires mass deportation. And so now, as the late Professor Huntington said, the establishment, the ruling class, in the form of the media, in the form of politicians, the Democrat Party, some Republicans too, they're now going to try the big pushback. Even though there was a landslide election, and immigration was the #1 issue. And people support deportation. We have so-called sanctuary cities. You know what sanctuary cities are? You know what sanctuary states are? These blue state Democrats, they're Confederates. This is the ideology of the old Confederacy. This isn't federalism, where Governor Abbott, as an example, was trying to enforce federal law, but the federal government wouldn't enforce federal law under Biden. This is a case of Illinois or California or the state of New York or these other dark blue states saying, we are independent from the United States. We don't care what the Constitution says. We don't care what a president elected by a landslide says. We don't care what the immigration laws are. We are not going to permit you to deport our citizens. We are the ones that commit heinous crimes. That's fine. Sure, we can figure that out. The Communist Chinese will assist us, and Iran will assist us, and Syria doesn't exist anymore, so we don't even know who these people are. But, putting that aside, these Democrats are like the old Confederacy. They don't believe in the Union. They don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe in citizenship. It's Democrat Party first. No, they don't support slavery per se, although their policies do advance slavery, women in slavery, children in slavery, and they care little damn about it because they say little damn about it and they do nothing about it. No. But it promotes a heinous policy that anybody can come into the United States, and use our benefits and use our schools and use our hospitals, overwhelm our welfare system. And of course, in the end, the Democrats want them to vote. They want them to vote in the cities. They want them to vote in the states. They don't want voter ID because they want power. So this is what we need to remember. The old Confederacy is alive and well in the modern Democrat Party. Just different people, different direction, but still anti-American. I'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.